Dennis Allen gets fired, but what does that mean for the Atlanta Falcons?
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tanisha Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman, and Tori McElhaney. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So for the fifth time in 6 games, the Falcons got a W. Now we'll get to that, but first, let's get to what happened after a certain team lost 7 straight. So the New Orleans Saints have fired their head coach, Dennis Allen, after losing their 7th straight game Sunday, according to multiple reports this morning. The Saints, of course, won their first 2 games this season, but haven't won since, with their most recent loss, of course, occurring Sunday to the lowly Carolina Panthers, 23-22. And of course, Allen has been there since Sean Payton left the team back in 2022, 18-25 as a team's head coach. So first, guys, I wanted to do 2 things, Jarvis. 1, get your reaction first, and then 2, talk about how we feel that might impact Sunday's matchup and showdown in New Orleans. But first things first, what was your reaction and your thoughts to the Saints finally deciding to move on from Dennis Allen?
Oh, it was coming. We knew this was coming because here's the thing: Dennis Allen has been struggling, and then once you start off, with going 2-0, and then you lose 7 straight, and then throughout that time, your defense just looks awful and lost, and not just don't know what they're. It seems like they don't know what they're doing. Obviously, you've been dealing with injuries all across the board, right? But when you talk about being a defensive-minded head coach and that's what you do. That's why you got this job. And when that side of the ball starts going awry, that's when it's time to go ahead and move on. So, but yeah, this is interesting, right? Because when you think about the rivalry, you're getting ready to go up against get the last game of this particular series in the division, and it just seems like the Falcons have just been catching so many teams that just been a dumpster fire, and to put it lightly. So yeah, to hear Dennis Allen being fired, yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where most of us thought it was sort of a not an if, but a win. And it's been a win that we've been thinking about, Tori, for probably, if I'm being honest, and I'm of course from the area, so probably a little biased, but probably from the day he got hired. Most of us were thinking, okay, when is the pink slip going out? But that said, kind of how do you feel about hearing get your reaction, your first reaction to getting the news that, especially to Jarvis's point, that at this juncture, you decide you're going to move on as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that 7 losses, this is a results-driven league. You have to win games in order to stay around. I mean, and that's just fact of the matter. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised that it got to 7 games. I was thinking around 5 games, 4 games, especially kind of knowing the start that they did have. And yes, I know injuries can play a factor and everything like that, but it was just, it never turned a corner. It kept getting worse and worse, and it was almost like festering a bit. And when you have that situation, you've got to cut ties. You've got to get the cancer out. And I'm not calling Dennis Allen a cancer, but there are certain things that I think organizationally you have to do. You have to figure it out. What this means for the Falcons, though, they're going down to New Orleans and they're seeing a team that is beat up on multiple levels, mentally, physically, emotionally. And you can't walk in there and take that lightly, because sometimes when a team is as beat up as the Saints are right now, they have absolutely nothing to lose. They don't care. They're just going to go out there and play, get their game checks, and get out of there. And honestly, for a lot of these guys, and considering the way the Saints salary cap is right now, a lot of these guys could be playing for their future careers somewhere else, not in New Orleans. And you have to kind of have that in the back of your head. And I know that this was something that I talked about post-game with this game that the Falcons just won against Dallas. It was like, don't let what happened against Seattle happen against Dallas. On paper, this is a team that you should beat.
Mm-hmm.
And they're on a slide, and you're on a win streak, and you're coming off some big NFC South wins. It was almost the exact same situation coming in with both of those games in week 7 and week 9. And there were different results because they showed up, and especially in the first half, and was like, no, we're not going to do what we did last time. You almost have to have that same mentality going down to New Orleans in this next week.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, Tori, because as you were talking about it, that's exactly where my head went to. Like, good for the Falcons that they did beat the Cowboys, but just make sure that just like you didn't take them lightly and you came in with force and said, hey, we don't want another Seattle situation. You do have to have that same mentality because they may not be playing for something free in terms of the division, getting into the playoffs or what have you. But Tori makes a great point. They've got something that some of those players absolutely have something that they'll play for. And sometimes it's just even being spoiled. Like, yeah, we know we're out of it. We embarrassed ourselves in Carolina, but we know that this is a rivalry game, so we're still going to come to the plate. But for you, what was your first reaction when you heard the news about Dennis Allen? And to Tori's point, how do you think it's going to impact this game come Sunday?
Yeah, as Jarvis said, and others have said, it was an inevitability, and it was just a question of when, not if. And I think Jarvis nailed it, where like you're sitting there looking at Dennis Allen's defenses, and I think he's been the defensive coordinator there since 2017, and up through basically like September of this year, they always had like a top 5, top 10 defense during that entire tenure, and you've seen it kind of completely fall apart. So it's the sort of Office Space meme of, what is it exactly that you do here if you're not producing a high-end defense? And I think for the Saints, a lot of the last month has been, oh, well, Derek Carr's hurt, and we have several players hurt. And once Derek Carr comes back and Chris Olave and all those other guys come back, we'll get this thing back on track. And you figure going up against Carolina, who's, arguably the worst team in the league prior to Sunday, and now they can say we're definitely not the worst. You figure, okay, they'll get that rebound win. We'll sort of right the ship, that sort of thing. And then for them to do the thing that so far, I saw the stats on Twitter where, like I think it's like to outgain a team 150 yards, to win the turnover margin or whatever. Teams had been like 275-0. Now they're 275-1. And this is like the 4th time that's happened to the Saints, where some historic anomaly has happened. Like the Falcons win over them was another sort of historic anomaly. They had a couple more this season. So they have sort of morphed into the can't get right team. And I think for, if you're the Saints, you're like, why are we sort of continuing to set records in the wrong ways that we want to set records under Dennis Allen? So let's sort of right this ship.
And to kind of add to what Tori said earlier is about guys playing for contracts. That's what you got to beware of, right? Like that's the boogeyman, especially when you're going into their house. And I'm sure Raheem Morris is going to continue to drill down, like, hey man, these guys are playing for their careers. Forget who's at the head coach spot, right? Because we know that Dennis Allen, like Free mentioned, we knew that this was coming. We knew that this was eventually going to happen. And now that the cancer is out, if I can use Tori's term, now that the cancer is out.
I feel bad for saying that.
They've done the chemo. They've done Miss Benson has done the chemo on the New Orleans Saints right now.
I messed up.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I promise you, I'm not editing it out. I promise you. But when you take that aspect out of it, and you come to the realization, these players are going to come to the realization, like, man, my contract might not be around. Like this new regime may have to come in and get rid of me. So like these last 8 games, I got to put some good tape out here because I don't know if I'm going to be here next year. And I think that's what the Falcons have to concentrate on. Like, hey, not only is this a rivalry and they're down and out, but these guys out here playing for contracts. And contract year play, that is different. It's a little different for these guys, for sure.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, how things kind of play out down there because like you all said, it's been a clusterfuffle for a minute. I don't think it ever was anything really good under Dennis Allen, to be honest. And you all guys also mentioned as well, yeah, they've had injuries, but I mean, at this point in time, who hasn't? I mean, we're midway through the NFL season. And a lot of teams have found a way to bounce back and be resilient. And yeah, let's just be honest. It was always kind of at the feet of Dennis Allen as far as where this team was going to go, whether they rose or fell, no pun intended for rising up. But I think ultimately, sometimes you do have to cut off the head of the snake when, the snake's not snaking. But anyway.
I love these analogies. I love these analogies.
I love them. These have been great. Like the first 10 minutes
What's
of the show
the
is
other one?
amazing.
What's the other one? The fish stinks from the head. Isn't
Right.
that another one too?
From the head.
So let's throw that one out there too.
All of that. And Tori, that's so apropos because you think about going to New Orleans and you think about the head of the crawfish and what you have to do with it. So when you get a bad crawfish, you got to peel it, take the head off, keep it pushing.
This is amazing. Gotta suck that
I
brain up, baby.
I equally love and hate this simultaneously. Truly.
Both things can be true, Tori. Both things can be true.
Both things can be true.
But you know what? That is not, as we like to say, not our problem. And that's not the Atlanta Falcons problem because, hey, the Falcons are doing just the opposite, whereas the New Orleans Saints, unfortunately for them, are trending down. They're a clusterfuffle, and they got to figure it out for themselves. The Atlanta Falcons have absolutely figured it out, and we've seen the good returns on it. And we're going to talk about that when we come back in Under Further Review. This episode of our Atlanta sports party football party rather, is brought to you by Robinhood. So with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. Now, the new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold, so sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Now, terms do apply, and for product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, and of course, the rate may change, and there's gold membership that is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. But again, Robinhood Gold is something you may want to check out because it allows others to get the rates and perks that are usually reserved for the high society, and they offer a very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, and you can be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Terms do apply, but for product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold, and to sign up for the new gold standard that is Robinhood Gold, be sure to go to Robinhood.com/gold. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100% your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. And think of this. Prize Picks is also the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, California, Florida, Texas, and right here in Georgia. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an insurance injury policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. And if your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. So if you want to get in on the action, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you purchase your first $5 lineup. Again, download that Prize Picks app. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup, because Prize Picks runs your game. All right, guys, so let's get back to the good stuff on what has happened over on this side with the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, really good game on Sunday. The Falcons and I want to kind of start off with some of what we saw on the defensive side of the ball, because even as we talked about it on post game, the defense has, kind of been one that we've had to tap into, tap out of, tap on sometimes this season, but really saw a solid outing yesterday. And one of the areas where we didn't get a chance to talk about it yesterday, so I want to talk about it and ask you guys about it today, is the stops on 4th down. The Falcons got 4 of them in Sunday's game. So for you, Aaron, what did you see from the defense that led to those turnovers on downs, but also Dallas going 3 of 13 on 3rd down?
Well, I think two of those fourth down stops were just Cowboys receivers dropping the ball. So I can't give the Falcons defense too much credit for that one, but the other two, I think certainly you can give the Falcons defense all the credit for that. And I think the first one with Caden Ellis, I think was kind of for me, it kind of felt like the turning point in the game
Yep.
when the Falcons got that stop, and then I think went down the field and went up like I think 14-3 at that point. And so for that, like that was just Caden Ellis, being locked in. And I think that's probably if I'm gonna give an overview of all of them, it's guys being locked in, because later in the game when you get the fourth down stop on the fake punt, that's Natron Brooks not getting fooled by that and being locked in, and much to Jarvis's chagrin, not picking it off and taking it back to the house. But the rest of us are just fine with getting the stop on that particular play. So it's not.
They scored. They scored a touchdown on the next drive.
Yes,
it's
they
fine,
did.
Jarvis.
It's not
You
just me,
know,
guys.
yeah.
It's not just me. That
I'm like that dad. Like I'm like that helicopter dad on the football field. You know what I'm saying? Like when I watch the Falcons, like, come on, son, that's good. Good job, but you could doggone score.
But yeah, I think overall, you're clearly seeing a defense doing much more of the details, being better in situations, and that's just not only the physical things that you got to do to get off blocks and make tackles and stuff like that, but just recognizing, okay, this is the situation that we're in. This is what they're trying to do. Excuse me. And you saw that with Caden Ellis sort of shooting into the backfield and breaking up that jet sweep. And then you saw that with Natron Brooks breaking up that fake punt. And then even, on the drop passes, like, guys were in position to get stops there. So, they deserve some credit for that.
Now, Tori, let's stay with the linebackers. And maybe, Tori, you'll give them a little more love than Free just did, but okay.
It was so funny. It was so funny.
Right. Because I'm like, the linebackers, arguably had their best game of the season. They're the one group where we've been like, you want to talk about can't get right from the last segment? Okay. This has been a group we've been talking about can't get right pretty much for the entirety of the season. So for you, Tori, what made the difference in the play of the linebacker core Sunday?
So I think Caden Ellis has been sniffing a lot of these big plays, but hasn't really made them yet. And he made them on Sunday. Like, it's the difference in no one talking about Caden Ellis. He's still doing the same things. I think a lot of people were like, oh, like watching this game, like, wow, look at the way they're using Caden Ellis. Isn't that so cool and so great? And it's like they've been using him the same way all season long. It's just he hasn't gotten home just yet. Yeah. And the difference is he was making plays, and he was the difference in Dallas being able to, or taking things away from Dallas, I think is more apropos. But I thought it was really interesting as well that we can talk about the linebacker core and what they were able to do, especially Caden Ellis. What I found absolutely fascinating was how this stat came up as I was looking through some stuff today on Next Gen Stats, that Dak Prescott averaged a career low 3.7 air yards across 24 passes. And over 65% of the yards that he did get in terms of passing yards were yards after contact and yards after the catch. And that just goes to show me that Dak Prescott was not willing to air it out against this secondary on Sunday. He's thrown 8 interceptions beyond the sticks, which I think leads the NFL in that category. And he was really not wanting to give the ball in the general area. He was not willing to put the ball in the general area of Jesse Bates or Justin Simmons. And I think what happens, and honestly, Mike Hughes or AJ Terrell had a couple here and there based on the alignment, but like, I thought that was very interesting to me, especially considering how their run game hasn't really been productive for them. You don't have Ezekiel Elliott in this game. He was left back in Dallas. So that was a very interesting decision, and I think it shows the level of respect that Dak Prescott, Dallas offensive coordinator, has for the back end of this secondary. And I do think that linebackers play a role in that too when they're on these tight ends.
And I think that for me, the thing that really stood out to me, I kind of mentioned it a little bit on the Falcons postcast yesterday, but I've just going back and kind of just running through, the abbreviated version of the game. I think that this is it was fascinating to watch like the adjustments that Jimmy Lake made with his defense because a lot of people talk about how they got to get sacks, they got to get sacks, they got to get sacks. How they going to do that without having to go trade for somebody and that person coming in and being a savior and everybody automatically just start getting sacks? No,
Mhm.
here's what Jimmy Lake did. He started running twists and stunts, and there was one stunt where you had Caden Ellis lined up over the center, over the guard, and then he had the defensive end and defensive tackle coming down, crashing down on that center. And then Caden Ellis was looping around and coming around and getting pressure on the quarterback. So those are some of the things that really stood out to me. Like they really put an emphasis on, hey, we're going to move you guys around so these offensive linemen won't just get used to just getting their regular sets, normal sets, and you coming off and trying to bull rush, and they're just sitting down there sitting on it, and the quarterback got all day to throw the football. So I think that the more that they put that type of stuff on tape, I feel like that's gonna help them out in the long run, regardless of whether or not they bring somebody in. And I also want to highlight Arne Ebiketie because I feel like this dude, he's a guy that coming into the season, and I'm talking about last year and just going through the tape about what he's bringing to the table. He's a guy that he was able to get home essentially, but he just wasn't able to finish, get the sack, put the man on the ground. But we saw him do that this week. He got home. He had almost had another one as well. So and I think that it was just the little things for him and making sure he's holding that contain and not knowing, being very tempted to jump inside and try to beat that Guyton because Guyton was struggling. He was giving him all he wanted. He could handle throughout the entire game to the point where they started chipping AK. I was just like, whoa, that you talk about respect factor, Tori. That's what you talk about respect. When guys start chipping you, they're like, oh, okay, 17. Yeah, we're going to have to get you some help over there, Mr. Guyton. So, yeah, I think that those two things that are things that really just stood out to me. The adjustments, the scheme, the rotations, bringing guys in and making sure guys are fresh. We saw Ryan Nielsen have success with that last year. I feel like that's going to be the things that are going to help this team continue to grow as a defense. And I think that Jimmy Lake deserves some credit.
Well, Tori talked about situational ball and how good it looked on the defensive side. We'll talk about what it looked like on the offensive side of the ball. And if we need to see any moves made come Tuesday, we'll discuss in What's Next. This episode of our Locked On Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Hillsdale College. So think about this. I know for many of us, maybe time is not on our side. It feels like 24 hours in a day is just not enough, but you don't want to waste your time scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours if you feel like you already don't have a lot of time in your day. So how about using it wisely? Maybe you're a history buff, or maybe you like economics. Maybe you study these things in school, maybe not, or maybe it's just time for a refresher. Well, that is where Hillsdale College comes in. They offer more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, and Introduction to Free Market Economics. So Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, which is good because that way you can start whenever and tune in wherever you want. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lecture. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register. So if you want to get a little bit smarter, get a little bit knowledgeable, get a little wiser, check out hillsdale.edu/locked-on. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by FanDuel. So you can get ready to tackle the second half of NFL action for the second half of the season with FanDuel America because it's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we are talking a little bit earlier about situational football from the defensive perspective, but I think it's one of those things where we kind of had some questions here and there over seasons past and maybe a little bit even in the beginning of this season, but situational football seems not to be as much of an issue anymore. Was there a moment, or what moment on offense for you, Jarvis, did you feel like the Falcons were maybe more proficient, especially at situational football Sunday?
For me, it has to be, being in a run game. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't like, oh my God, they ran for 175 yards. Oh, but it was when they had to, the situation presented itself. It was more so timely plays, timely run plays, and especially when when you turn around and hand it off to Bijan Robinson when it was a play was supposed to be -2 yards, he turned it into a +4. Or it was a swing pass out to where it was supposed to be a -2 and he turns into a +10, so it's just those things like that. It's just the variance of what a play could have been and what it is because of who Bijan is. I feel like that was the reason why we saw them being efficient. We saw them making those timely, having those timely drives and touchdowns too, because, you know, there were moments where you Dallas made plays where they could have, potentially shift that momentum, but their offense came right back down. Boop, score a touchdown. And like, no, we got this. We got this. And they sent the message to the Cowboys saying, hey, we got this, especially, with that Tyler Allgeier touchdown. I just felt like that was such just a crushing type of thing that if I'm on the field in that blue and white jersey, I'm just like, man, these cats might have this one. It might be over for us going forward. So yeah, I think those were the things that kind of stood out to me to just make me say, hey, this is why they were able to do what they did on Sunday.
And
Can we talk too about
go
like
ahead.
Chris Lindstrom's like swan dive?
Oh gosh, yes, yes.
That-
Call
on
him the
that
cleanup
touchdown,
man.
I don't know
Sorry.
if that one is good, or of me seeing Caleb McGarry kind of do his backstroke
Just
to
like,
get
yeah. It
oh my
was
God,
so
that was
good. I'm
amazing.
sorry I interrupted you.
No, I
Please,
totally
please.
love
I
that.
just had to say that.
No, that was one of our favorite moments, if not our favorite moments of the entire game. But that also, Tori, I want to take it back as well, because I think something that also made us smile, made us really pleased, was the fact that, yeah, the Falcons went 3 and out on their first drive, and you're thinking, okay, this is going to be another one of those slow starts. But then that second drive, you really saw them get nice chunk plays. You saw a good mix of pass and run, and of course, then Bijan Robinson punches it in for the first score. And for me, I also felt like that drive kind of signified not just what that game was going to be, but also where this offense continues to go.
No, I think you're exactly right. That was the moment where I felt like, oh, they are in control of this game. And I
Yes.
think that
Yes.
that's a very different feeling than I've had in games past. I
Mhm.
think that it's been one of those things where it's like they need some time to get going. But in that drive, I was kind of like, okay, like if they do what they're supposed to do, if they don't let penalties kind of hold them back, they'll control this game. And they did from that point out. And what I really did like too is again the connection with Kirk Cousins and his receivers. I think that over the course of these last few weeks, especially, you see him get more and more comfortable. I know I just tweeted this out, but like before the last probably 3 weeks, when Kirk Cousins was under pressure, he wasn't really connecting as much. He's getting sacked a lot, or having to throw it away, and there were these off kilter moments when he was under pressure with this offense. Now, in the last 2 weeks, he has well over 200 passing yards when he's under pressure, which to me is indicative of trusting his receivers, trusting the offense to scheme somebody open when it's a loaded box, and when he has a guy come in either direction. Of course, like pass rush is good. There are good players in this league. Pass rush is going to get home. But when you have those moments of being under pressure, the fact that he can bail himself out now because of the comfort that he feels within this scheme, I think that speaks volumes to the growth that we've seen, not just of Kirk Cousins, not just of Zach Robinson as a play caller, but the collective unit as a whole.
Yeah, I would say the same. And Free, for me, kind of an expansion of, or piggybacking off of what Tori said, each week, pretty much for the entirety of the season, we've said that Kirk's been able to hit multiple receivers, right? So we've seen 4 or 5 receivers get at least one catch. But this time we saw 4 receivers score. So I think not just are you spreading the ball around, but you're starting to see the results that you want to see, which is getting into the end zone, punching it. And I think that's also a critical piece of showing the evolution of this offense, and also showing the fact that there's a trust factor there because we're seeing them deliver.
Yeah, what Kirk Cousins is at his best is that sort of point guard that's not going to score a ton of points, but it's going to get 15 or 20 assists in a game, to use a basketball analogy there, of just being able to distribute the ball.
Today.
Just being able to distribute the ball to his playmakers. We know Kirk is not going to go out there and, take it to the hoop, I guess you could say, in terms of his playmaking ability as a runner, although he flashed a little bit at the end of that Bucks game. But I think that's what you want to see from Kirk Cousins, and that requires a comfort and a command in the offense that you're starting to see much more consistently as he grew in this offense. Because I think, a lot of people came into the season with high expectations given the money that they paid Kirk and the familiarity with, the McVay style offense that Zach Robinson is bringing in. So I think a lot of people thought instantly there's going to be success. And then you saw the struggles in week 1, and there was quite a bit of panic, and definitely not on the Locked On Falcons podcast at all, after that week 1 game. And you get the situation where it's one of those things where you've seen that comfort and growth, and after the overreactions from week 1, it's like, okay, let's get to the season that we expect to see. But we talk about the situational football, but we talk about that second drive. But I think that second scoring drive after the Caden Ellis stop was another pivotal moment for situational football, because the drive starts off pretty well, but you get to 3rd and 4, you run the ball to Tyler Allgeier. He gets a big gain to convert, but it gets called back on a penalty. And you're like, oh, okay. It's like the first drive. The penalties are going to wipe out the gains. And so you have a 3rd and long. You get an 11-yard completion to Kyle Pitts underneath, and you're expecting, okay, the Falcons are going to settle for a long field goal. And that's kind of a win for the Dallas defense, given that circumstance of basically giving the Falcons favorable field position and only giving up 3 points in that situation. But then for the Falcons to go for it on 4th down and then to score on the Darnell Mooney touchdown with a perfect play call and a perfect execution of that play call against the pressure that the Dallas Cowboys were bringing on that particular play, to me was really a great indicator of this team not only, executing in situational football, but overcoming adversity in that individual drive there, where normally we'd be like, oh, here we go again, Falcons shooting themselves in the foot and not being able to maximize it. So I think, all of those things are great indications that, this team not only is going to be able to push things forward, but also when they get into these adverse situations, also be able to dig themselves out of holes.
Indeed. Well, thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta Football Party Mondays and Thursdays for a double dose of all things Falcons. And be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you Thursday.